Well, this one's a little complicated, I guess, but do with it whatever you will. In the open view, God does not have libertarian free will to choose to sin. I don't think anybody says that, but does have libertarian free will in other matters, such as creating the world or not creating the world.
Right.
So how is God's freedom different from ours if they're both types of libertarian freedom?
Right. So first of all, that's not an open theist question. That is, it's a question to anyone who ascribes a degree of libertarian freedom to God. So this, again, this is an old question. It goes way back to the beginning of the history of the church. Okay, and it's actually in Judaism as well. There are two main views, and for those who want to read, a little bit more about it, let me see here. It's page 341 of my book, God Who Risks, footnote 43. So it's buried in 100 pages of footnotes. It's buried in a footnote there, and I say, look, there's two views, and again, it's not open theist views. It's just there's two views in the history of Christianity. One is that God does not have what's called morally significant freedom. So in street language, we'd say God does not have the freedom to sin. Okay, so that's been the dominant view, but there's also been a minority view. And this is, by the way, if you want to look it up, it's called divine impeccability. Okay, that's the fancy word for can God sin or divine impeccability. There's two views. Main view, no, God can't. God has the libertarian freedom to choose to create or not, to choose to perform and act in certain place in history, but God cannot commit a moral evil. But the other view says God could commit a moral evil. So it's possible. So God has morally significant freedom. God can commit a moral evil, but God chooses not to. And God has always chosen not to. Now, there is a derivative of that view, which is you really weren't asking for, but I'm going to give you anyway. And a few authors have said not only does God have the ability to commit a moral evil, God has committed moral evils. And they look at, for instance, the text about genocide in the Bible and God doing things to certain people. And they say, well, that's a moral evil. Some of the depictions of God in the Bible are moral evil. And so there are authors who say not only God can do moral evil, but God has. But most of those who say God can commit a moral evil have said God chooses not to. And that's why God is morally praiseworthy. That's another name for this, divine impeccability. Is God morally praiseworthy? So in the most common view, they have the problem of why is God morally praiseworthy? God can't help but do the good. So now, I don't have a solution. I don't take a view here. I just say there's problems and there's good things and problems whichever way you go. But I'm like, when I read this research, I was like, oh my goodness. Wow. I was blown away by it. So I presume that most moral or open theists would side with the mainstream view that God does not have morally significant freedom. But I myself don't have a view on it.